Drones hit Russian territory after Ukraine was attacked overnight. Newsweek had a report titled, "Drone attacks target Russian territory after Ukraine hit overnight," which means, drone attacks Russian territory after Ukraine was attacked overnight. Russia suffered a wave of drone attacks overnight, when authorities in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv said they were the target of an attack of unprecedented density. Attacks have been reported across Russia, including in the Kursk and Bryansk regions, located near the border with Ukraine, and Smolensk, in western Russia. Drone incidents inside Russia have increased in intensity in recent weeks. On May 3, the Russian government press agency accused Ukraine of crashing 2 drones into the Kremlin residence of Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, describing the alleged attack as a planned act of terror and a plot to take Putin's life. Ukraine has denied any involvement in the attacks inside Russia. Alexander Bogomaz, the head of the Bryansk region, said on his Telegram channel that a Ukrainian drone was shot down by air defenses in the town of Klintsy. There were no casualties. The balcony of an apartment building was damaged. Emergency services are working on the spot, Bogomaz wrote. Earlier, on May 13, Bogomaz said a drone had hit this territory, dropping bullets on the roof of a building in the town of Starodub. He said there were no casualties in that incident. And on May 14, police officers in the village of Koromnoy are said to have been attacked by a drone that dropped an explosive device into their car. On Tuesday, Roman Starovoyt of the Kursk region said a Ukrainian drone dropped an explosive device on an excavator in the Sudzansky district, injuring 1 person. Starovoyt wrote, the construction equipment driver suffered a minor shoulder injury. And in the Smolensk region, a drone with 2 cameras crashed into the territory of a medical facility belonging to the Russian Interior Ministry, Telegram channel Shot reported on Tuesday. According to Telegram channel, the drone was found by a nurse who called the police. No explosives were found and it was sent for further inspection. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russia launched 18 missiles overnight on Tuesday, all of which were destroyed by the country's air defenses, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine Valery Zaluzhnyi said. The head of Kyiv's military junta, Sergei Popko, said on Telegram that the city had suffered an attack of an unprecedented density in terms of the maximum number of missiles that hit it in a short period of time. The shortest. Popko said it marked the 8th attack on Kyiv this month. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry for comment via email. 2. Ukraine officially denies Russia's claim that hypersonic missiles destroyed the Patriot defense system. A Russian media outlet called Zvezda reported that a Ukrainian Patriot system was destroyed by a Russian Kinzhal missile. On the afternoon of Tuesday, May 16, when asked about this news, Colonel Yuri Inat denied and confirmed once again that all 18 missiles, including 6 Kinzhal missiles, were destroyed before reaching the target. Pepper. As rumors continue to repeat the accusations of the Russian media agency Zvezda, during a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center Wednesday afternoon, May 17, the spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force, Colonel Yuri Inat, officially denied again that no U.S.-made Patriot missile defense system was destroyed or damaged in an airstrike on Kyiv. The Russian Defense Ministry made this assertion on Tuesday following an overnight airstrike on the Ukrainian capital. 2 U.S. officials later said the Patriot system may have been damaged, but it did not appear to have been destroyed as they continued to receive signals. I would say, don't worry about the fate of the Patriot, said Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Yuri Inat. He flatly ruled out the possibility that Russia's Kinzhal missile brought down the Patriot system. Destroying the system with some kind of Kinzhal, that's impossible. Everything they say is there, it's still in their propaganda archives, forget it. Colonel Yuri Inat said that the Russian army is providing relief to Bakhmut city through Mariupol. An endless convoy of Russian convoys was seen by local residents and reported to the Ukrainian army. In the past 24 hours, the air forces have launched 56 airstrikes targeting mainly all relief efforts on the battlefield of Bakhmut city. Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said that the personnel loss of the invaders had surpassed 200,000. Specifically, Ukraine's self-defense forces eliminated from the battle around 200,590 Russian invaders between February 24, 2022 and May 17. In the past 24 hours, 610 Russian soldiers have been removed from the battle along with 9 tanks, 17 armored vehicles, 16 artillery systems, 2 air defense systems, and 19 troop and fuel transport vehicles. Overall, from February 24, 2022 to May 17, Russia's total combat losses also included 3,771 tanks, 7,365 armored vehicles, 3,166 artillery systems, 562 rocket launchers, 318 air defense systems, 308 combat aircraft, 294 helicopters, 2,748 combat and tactical drones, 982 cruise missiles, 18 warships, 6,067 troop and fuel transport vehicles, and 417 specialized equipment. 3. Intelligence Bulletin of the UK Department of Defence Intelligence. Kinzhal, Russian for dagger, is an advanced Russian hypersonic missile that entered service in December 2017 and is one of 5 new Russian strategic weapons announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin in March 2018. While the Russians call it the Kinzhal missile, NATO calls it the Killjoy missile. In the latest intelligence report, the UK Department of Defence Intelligence said the following. Over the past week, air combat on the Russian-Ukrainian border has increased. On May 13 alone, 4 aircraft of the Russian Aerospace Forces, including 2 advanced fighters and 2 helicopters, crashed, apparently shot down over the Bryansk region of Russia. On May 3, Ukraine shot down a Killjoy air-launched ballistic missile for the first time. Russia then made it a priority to try to neutralize Ukraine's improved air defenses, but in the process may have lost some more Killjoys. The increased air threat to Russia's border region will be of particular concern to the Russian Aerospace Forces as they use the area to project air power in support of war. Killjoy's apparent vulnerability could come as a surprise and embarrassment to Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has hailed the system as invincible. 4th, new humiliation for Putin when every missile advertised as unstoppable was shot down in Kiev. Olivia Burke and Will Stewart of The Sun, based in London, have a report titled Limp Vlad Humiliation for Putin After 6 Unstoppable, 7,000 miles per hour Kinzhal missiles are all shot down over Kiev, Ukraine claims, means Putin trembles. New humiliation for Putin as Ukraine reports all 6 unstoppable rockets were shot down in Kiev. Vladimir Putin is facing new humiliation after Ukraine claimed all 6 of his unstoppable Kinzhal missiles were shot down in Kiev. The Russian president's unprecedented assault on the capital, Kiev, backfired somewhat after his most feared artillery was subdued on the night of May 15 and 16. Ukraine claims to have shot down all 18 rockets fired at the city overnight in what it described as especially high density. Kiev's sky lit up with horror as Russian rockets rained down from the sky, and air raid sirens sounded across the area. Valery Zaluzhny, chief of the General Staff of the Ukrainian Army, said Russia attacked from 3 angles using missiles in the air, at sea, and on land. This includes 9-caliber cruise missiles, which can travel at 5 times the speed of sound, launched from ships in the Black Sea. 3 land-based missiles were also fired at Kiev, along with half a dozen Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, which Ukraine claims to have shot down. The Kh-47, also known as the Russian dagger, is said to be able to travel 12 times the speed of sound, making it virtually undetectable and disabled from a defensive position. The missiles, which can reach speeds of more than 7,000 miles per hour and were frequently launched by Putin during the Ukraine war, can be loaded with up to 1,000 pounds of explosives or even nuclear warheads. Putin himself has touted the Kinzhal as an unstoppable force that could even be used against NATO, but now he has only 73 of them to use. Ukraine appears to be making the most of Western defenses and claims all 6 have been shot down. The war-torn nation says it intercepted an entire salvo of hypersonic missiles with the US-made Patriot air defense system. Earlier this month, Ukraine claimed to have shot down a Kinzhal over Kiev for the first time. Kiev Governor General Serhiy Popko said, the maximum number of rockets was fired into the city in the shortest amount of time. This time, the enemy carried out a complex attack in different directions using drones, cruise missiles and possibly ballistic missiles. According to preliminary information, most of the enemy targets in Kiev airspace have been detected and destroyed. 5. Belgium announced its readiness to train Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16. President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed the F-16 issue with Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. During the summit in The Hague earlier this month, the issue of F-16s was also discussed during the meeting between the President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky and the Prime Minister. We have said that we cannot provide aircraft yet, but we can train pilots, a statement from the Belgian Prime Minister's office said. Presidential Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak said UK and Dutch Prime Ministers Rishi Sunak and Mark Rutte would work to form an international fighter jet alliance for Ukraine. 6. Zelensky welcomes good start to F-16 fighter alliance announced by UK and Netherlands. Zelensky welcomed the British and Dutch commitment to building an international alliance to provide fighter support to Ukraine and France's support for the alliance as a good start. Reacting to the pledge in his nightly speech, Zelensky called it a good start for the Union, adding, "Thank you all." British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte on Tuesday pledged to build an international coalition to provide fighter jet support to Ukraine. Western nations have so far not provided advanced jets to help Ukraine control the skies against the Russian Air Force. However, Sunak said on Monday that the UK was preparing to open a flight school to train pilots for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron also offered to train fighter pilots for Ukraine, but did not mention sending fighter jets to Kiev. 7. NATO member warns that Ukraine counterattack time frame is narrowing. Newsweek ran a report titled Ukraine's Counteroffensive Window Shrinking, NATO member, which means NATO member warns that Ukraine's counteroffensive timeframe is narrowing. Czech President Petr Pavel has warned that the opportunity for Ukraine to carry out major offensive operations against the invading Russian army will close again in the autumn, calling on NATO countries to supply Ukraine all necessary equipment and ammunition before spring turns to summer. Speaking at the Copenhagen Democratic Summit in the Danish capital on Monday, Pavel, who previously served as chairman of the NATO Military Committee and as chief of the General Staff of the Czech Armed Forces, said the allies should not be expected to send powerful weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine has the opportunity to launch a major counterattack this summer, and that opportunity is now shrinking, the Czech president said in Copenhagen. The later the donations arrive, the less useful they will be, because in the fall major military operations will again have to be halted due to weather and ground conditions. In order to make good use of the available time, we should have supplied Ukraine with all the necessary equipment and ammunition by spring at the latest, added Pavel. Kyiv has been preparing for his next counterattack for several months. Western heavy armored vehicles, other vehicles, long-range missiles, drones and large amounts of ammunition have been delivered to support Kyiv's army. Thousands of people are being trained there. NATO bases are spread across allied countries. So-called shaping operations, that is, operations that create an environment conducive to the ultimate impulse of the attack, seem to be underway, with Ukrainian worm attacks targeting into Russian command and logistics centers to undermine Moscow's capabilities. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops are also on the offensive around the destroyed eastern city of Bakhmut, now synonymous with the widely reported attributive brutality that characterizes most of Russia's military operations in Ukraine since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. Russian commanders are said to have tasked the elite paratroopers to limit the advance of the Ukrainian troops. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Defense Ministry for comment. It remains to be seen where Ukraine's main thrust, possibly supported by Western vehicles such as the Leopard 2 tank and the US-made Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, will take place. Observers have speculated that a march south through the Zaporizhia front towards temporarily occupied Melitopol could cut Moscow's land bridge to Crimea, while others have suggested that Kyiv may choose to advance further into the northeastern Luhansk region. Ukraine's leaders have tried to downplay expectations while sending mixed messages about their readiness, perhaps as part of a disinformation campaign intended to confuse Russian forces. For example, Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov said at the end of April that strike forces were ready. But President Volodymyr Zelensky recently said that Kyiv needed more time. Ukraine's foreign partners have also warned against investing too much in the upcoming activity. Pavel previously warned against the temptation to push them to prove some results, while stressing the importance of the counterattack. It will be extremely harmful for Ukraine if this counterattack fails, because they won't have another chance, at least not this year. President Pavel said that Kyiv could suffer terrible losses in haste to attack. It is extremely demanding in terms of gathering equipment for personnel, logistics, ammunition, finance, fuel. It's simply an opportunity this year, so it has to be successful. But Pavel also says Kyiv has a good chance of success. There is certainly a lot of hope that the Ukrainian counteroffensive will be successful, because Ukraine is motivated, well prepared, its army is experienced and certainly does not succumb to the shortcomings of the Russian army, the president of Czechoslovakia said above. Things don't always go according to wishes and plans, but I think Ukraine's chances of significant success are very high. 8. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the war in Ukraine could end because the US abandoned its allies, as the US did before in Afghanistan. The Russians are perplexed by the Ukrainian successes in the city of Bakhmut. So these days they find different ways to boost the morale of the Russians. Russia's state-run TASS news agency reported that in an interview with the Tsargrad TV channel, the head of Russian diplomacy reiterated that the United States has abandoned the Afghan leadership on which it has relied throughout 20 years of American invasion of that country. I hope that modern politicians pay attention to history, Lavrov said. Political scientists write a lot about this. They predict that all of this will continue as long as Americans need it. The Kyiv government will stay in power as long as the US needs them, the Russian foreign minister said. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's comments were widely applauded. However, former Russian commander Igor Girkin cautions that Lavrov's rhetoric that could speed the Ukrainians up the war is perhaps not in the interests of the Russian military at a time when it is in need of a respite and reorganization. 9. Food prices are expected to increase when Russia terminates the Black Sea grain deal. Reuters has the following helpful explanation of what lies in the Black Sea grain deal, which is at stake after Russia said it would pull out of the deal if its demands were not met. Under this agreement, Russia, Ukraine, Turkey and the United Nations established a Joint Coordination Center, or JCC for short, in Istanbul, led by officials from each side. Ukraine can safely export grain, food and fertilizers and related things, including ammonia, from the ports of Odessa, Chernomorsk and Yuzhny. All activities in Ukraine's territorial waters fall under the rights and responsibility of Ukraine. The parties agree not to carry out any attacks against merchant ships and other civilian vessels as well as facilities in ports covered by the agreement. To prevent provocations and incidents, the activities of ships passing through humanitarian corridors at sea are monitored remotely. No military ship, aircraft or drone may approach within 10 nautical miles of the corridor without JCC authorization. All merchant ships are subject to inspection in and out of Ukraine by a JCC team at Turkish ports. The agreement has been agreed to remain in effect for 120 days and to be automatically renewed upon maturity, unless one of the parties notifies the other of its intention to terminate the initiative or modify it. The deal was extended in November for 120 days and then in March for at least 60 days. Now, the current situation is this. In a letter to UN officials on March 16, Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, said Moscow would only consider extending the agreement. Grain exports in the Black Sea of Ukraine after May 18 if the following systemic problems are resolved. First, bring the Agricultural Bank of Russia, or Rosselskozbank, back to the SWIFT payment system. Second, continue to supply Russia with agricultural machinery and spare parts. Third, lift restrictions on insurance and port access for Russian ships and cargo. Fourth, resumption of the ammonia pipeline from Tolyatti in Russia to Odessa in Ukraine. Fifth, unlock the accounts and financial activities of Russian fertilizer companies. 10. The European Union should prevent India from reselling Russian oil to Europe, says top EU diplomat. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has said that the European Union should punish India for reselling Russian oil to Europe as refined fuel. Borrell said, "We must act to stem the flow of oil from Russia to India, which has become one of Russia's biggest oil buyers since Moscow launched its invasion of Ukraine. If the diesel or gasoline that is entering Europe comes from India and is produced with Russian oil, then that is definitely a sanctions evasion and member states must take action. If they're selling, it's because someone is buying. And we have to see who is buying," Borrell added. The European Union has not yet taken action to punish India for reselling Russian oil to Europe. However, Borrell told reporters he raised the issue with India's foreign minister, whom he met on Tuesday. According to Mr. Borrell, Russia has found new buyers. Before the war, and the sanctions that followed, Europe had long been Russia's biggest energy customer. The European Union had hoped that an embargo from a giant importer like it would put pressure on the Russian economy, but Moscow has found other buyers in Asia. India, which imports 80% of its oil, before the war bought only about 2% to 3% from Russia. But as oil prices skyrocketed last year, the government steadily increased its oil imports from Moscow, taking advantage of steep discounts. A recent report by the International Energy Agency found that Russia's oil exports reached a post-war high in April this year. Russia appears to have only minor problems finding people willing to buy its crude and petroleum products, the report adds. 11. Russia increases artillery fire on innocent civilians. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on Wednesday afternoon, May 17, the spokesman for the Ukrainian National Police, Captain Alyona Lyatnitska, said that on the night of Tuesday and Wednesday morning, May 17, the Russian military carried out the operation. A missile attack on Mykolaiv, one person injured. A shopping mall, car showroom and an industrial facility were partially destroyed, residential buildings and shops were damaged. In the morning, the Russian Federation shelled a hospital in Berislav, Kherson region. There was damage, no one was hurt. Yesterday, the Russian military fired more than 400 rounds into the Kherson area, 7 people were injured. On May 16, as a result of Russian shelling in the Donetsk region, 1 person died and 7 were injured. 3 people were injured in the Zaporizhia region yesterday. At the same press conference, Donetsk Governor Pavlo Kirilenko said that in the past day, the Russian military carried out 2 airstrikes and 34 artillery attacks on Vuhledar. The Russians conducted 2 airstrikes and 34 artillery attacks on Vuhledar in the direction of Volnovakha. Prikostivka was also shelled, Novokrayenka was attacked by a missile system. In the direction of Donetsk, 1 person was killed and another was injured in Kurakov. 3 apartment complexes and 4 private houses in the town were damaged. 3 more houses were damaged in Kurakivka. According to Kirilenko, 1 person was injured and 2 infrastructure damaged in Kostantinivka. In the community of Toretsk, 5 houses were damaged in Toretsk and 3 others, in New York. In the Chasevyar community, 1 person was injured, 10 houses and 1 shop were damaged. 3 damaged houses in Vasyukivka, Soldar community. In the direction of Lysychansk, the Russians shelled 17 times on the outskirts of the Lyman community. There have been casualties.